We were like in hard conditions, sleeping under mosquito nets with no electricity, and like literally like trying to keep the mud from pooling on the tops of our shoes while we were doing dentistry.
All right, Alex, I'm not going to do one of my little 2-minute talks on something else for this
Thank
episode.
you.
I know, you're probably happy about that. And that's because we've got an awesome guest on. I would say he is probably our generation's Gordon Christensen kind of,
sure,
right?
Yeah.
But really focused in on business and practice management stuff, right?
Yeah.
Back in the day, I feel like my parents' generation was always even though my dad's not a dentist, but old dentists will say, right?
Okay.
Would always say what product should I use? Should you blah, blah, blah. And they'd always say, oh, well, what does Gordon Christensen say, right?
So the expert.
Yeah. And I feel like nowadays with either our generation or the younger generation of dentists too, if people are ever what's the best system for building this? Or should I start a practice or anything related to that business part of it?
Yeah.
Everyone always just references Mark Costas, right?
Yes.
I think when we did our startups a while back, I think that's when Mark just had done a couple books, right? Don't you remember?
I remember his books. I remember the podcast early on those drives when I had that acquisition, when I bought that practice. Yeah, it was oh gosh, what can I learn? Because I needed to learn everything. And so just gobbled everything up from that original podcast of his. Yeah.
Yeah. So we wanted to do something fun today since we could bring Mark on. So Mark, first off, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you guys so much. Jeez, I'm honored to be here. And that was really, really nice build up. I mean, Gordon's been on the podcast before. I consider he was my generation's Gordon Christensen. So even to be mentioned in the same sentence, Gordon Christensen was Gordon Christensen. Yeah. So yeah.
We just called Mark old. All right. Fine.
I appreciate you guys.
But I thought for today's episode, we could do something really cool. So I didn't prep Mark with any of this. We're going to kind of do this live. But a few months ago, I had reached out to people that he works with, some of the team members that are part of, Dental Success Network or Dental Success Institute, some of the coaches. And it was just what are the things that you feel like Mark does that have allowed him to become as successful as he has, right? And
helped thousands of dentists along the way. Yeah.
And so I reached out to a bunch of them. They all were awesome about responding pretty quickly, which was nice. And so they kind of shared with me some of the things that they feel like Mark does that, like I said, it made him so successful. And then I took those, I ran it through ChatGPT because I feel like that runs our lives now. And I was let's make some Markisms, right? So these aren't necessarily phrases that Mark uses, but these are things that people have said about him. And then I try to condense it into something that would actually be, easy to understand. Maybe.
We'll
find out.
Okay.
So Mark doesn't know what these are.
Okay.
Right. We're going to go through. There's 5 of them that I have.
Okay.
I'll go through. We'll just go through each one by one, and then we'll let Mark kind of respond and kind of go through it.
Let's do it.
So, all right. You ready, Mark?
I'm ready, guys. This is so fun.
All right. So the first one is spot the spark, fuel the fire. And what this is seeing potential in others before they even do.
Yeah, I often say that of my few talents, my number one superpower, and I love your background because you have superheroes in the background. But my number one superpower is being able to surround myself with people that are much, much smarter than me and being able to spot potential. So that is true. I like how you said that, Eric, in that a lot of times I say, hey, look, I see something in you. If you just add a little bit more attention here and a little bit less there, I think we're on to something. And usually that's okay, stop spinning your wheels and stop trying to be everything in the practice. You don't have to be the office manager and the CMO, and you don't have to, fix your own chairs and be your own tech. It's focus on leadership, focus on building the model that you've selected as far as your dental practice goes. And you can really, really accentuate the positives that you're bringing to the world. And a lot of people don't see that in themselves because they think that they have to be everything to everybody. So objectively looking out, they always say that you can't read the label on the jar when you're inside of it. So I am the guy that is able to take a step back and say, I'm looking at you objectively. You can't even see the opportunities in front of you because they're so close. I'm going to help you I'm going to nudge you along and say, these are your strengths. Let's work on these.
So is that something you've always been able to do, like you feel like as like a kid, or is this something you learned through your own practice ownership journey, you kind of growing and then saying, I've developed these skills?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm dyslexic. I have a mild form of dyslexia that was undiagnosed when I was growing up, and all of my sons have kind of the same thing. So we read and process information differently. And also, my first language is English, but I come from, an immigrant family, so they didn't want me to learn their language because they didn't want me to have an accent, and they wanted me to assimilate 100% to the United States. I'm the first and only American born to that family. So I picked up their language. I can't speak it, but I can understand exactly what they're saying. So I'm good at contextual clues. So I can pick up bits and pieces of what's happening in the context, and I understand kind of key words. And with those keywords, I'm able to understand and communicate back in English. And they're always like, well, you can't form sentences, but you understand exactly what we're talking about. And the same thing kind of went with reading and comprehension. I was able to pick up kind of bits and pieces of what people were talking about in class. From the context, I understood context, and then I would understand bits and pieces from sentences, and I'd be able to put that together. So I think that kind of the knack of being able to do that really helped me in a lot of different ways of being able to kind of look at a context and understand like what some of the things were, some of the key elements were to that. So that was the same with test taking. That was the same with passing test scores. It was the same with communicating with people that don't speak my language. And I am able to kind of understand context if I'm watching like a telenovela on TV. I can understand, even though I only understand like maybe 25 Spanish words. I know what's going on immediately. And I think that kind of is something that is almost a gift of having that learning disability, being able to understand context a little bit better.
That's really cool. So were you then good at, so like one thing I always struggled with, I don't know if I've ever asked you, Alex, if you were good at it or not, but you know, in the States, Alex is Canadian, so maybe they didn't have to do this, but we had like standardized tests, right? Did you have those too, Mark, where like every year you'd have to take like a proficiency test, and I was always really, really bad at reading comprehension.
Mm-hmm, me too.
So like I could like I get test scores back and it'd be like your math scores are like, you know, 5th grade level when you're in 2nd grade, right? And that was good. And then reading comprehension, it was like, you are terrible. Like you just don't get it. And so like for me, I always had a really hard time taking, like if it was like the author says there's this paragraph, right? And the author, what does the author mean by this? What do they mean by this? I was always terrible at that part. Like I always way underperformed. And I don't know, Alex, if you were like that at all, or if that resonates.
No, I was pretty good at those.
Yeah, like, she was one of those that was good at everything.
No, not everything. Not everything. No, it was just you read it and there's facts there, and you just like analyze it. I don't know.
Yeah,
that wasn't too difficult. But
to your point, Alex, that's how most of the people were that I was growing up with, right? You have to be first in your class to get into a good, undergrad, and you have to be like, if you're going to get into dental school, you have to graduate very high in your class. And then I remember when I first got to dental school, I was like sitting around going, it took me 21 tries to get into dental school in 3 years. And there's people sitting amongst me. They're like, oh, I'm kind of bummed out because Marquette was my safety school. And I was like, they're the one and only school that accepted me out of 21. And they're like, yeah, I really wanted to go to Michigan, but I only got into, Washington, Marquette, and somewhere in Chicago. And I'm like, geez, man, these guys had safety schools and stuff. And then they were all like, yeah, I was a biomedical science major. I was a biochem major. And I was like, I was a psych major, and I took the minimum amount of science classes to get in here. So I remember I was like, okay, I am going to surround myself with these super smart people, because if I can study like they do, then I will develop some sort of a magical photographic memory like they have. And I remember like when we were all forming study groups our first year, I found all the smartest people. I joined their study group, and I'd be like in their quote unquote study group. They'd just be, BSing around, and it would be like a 45-minute session. And I'd be like, I know nothing more than I did before, but maybe this is how smart people study. So I'd go home and I'd just read over my notes a couple more times, and I'd fail every test. And I was like, Oh, I understand now. I have to surround myself with people that learn the same way that I do, not the people that have the photographic memories, because they don't have the gift of not having to work hard like I did. So I've had to do every single thing in my life. Didn't come easily. Everything was harder. In sports, I was the smallest kid, so I had to work extra hard. And for business, I didn't understand it in the beginning, even though I had business classes and stuff before. So I had to work extra hard there, and trial and error, and especially in academics, I had to work really hard. But I really feel like that ended up being kind of a benefit to me, and especially being able to read people and being able to spot like the genuine people with good character quickly, eliminate the people that weren't that way, and also the people that were smart and could help me in my journey.
Yeah, I mean, for us in our dental school, like one of our like best friends in dental school, similar story. He's awesome. He does so much now, but like he was the kid that like failed every test, had to remediate everything. But the second we got up to clinic in third year, he just started crushing it. Yeah. He went to the perio department, like prosta everywhere, and was like, I want to do implants. Normally in our program, it was really hard to get in that because the perio residents would get it, or, the other residents would do those cases, and he just pushed his way in. This guy now, actually, I'm pretty sure he probably produces the most out of every kid in our class, and he was probably one of like the bottom ranked for the first couple of years, right? Yeah. And he's still a great friend. And, and I remember he said this when we graduated dental school. Everyone's talking about like, what do you want to do, right? And they're like, oh, I'm going to go back and I want to practice with my dad, and I want to go back and I want to do this or that. And he just responded, he goes, I'm just going to crush it. And everyone like laughed at him at first. And I remember going to him and I was like, no, like I understand what you're saying, and I feel like you're actually going to make it. And we've been out a little over 10 years. He does crazy complex dental cases, produces a ton, helps a ton of people, and he's probably the most successful kid in our class. So it's really cool to see when stuff like that happens.
Mm-hmm. That is cool. And do you guys remember, for me, I was just talking to some students about this at the summit yesterday, and they were like, I was trying to convey to them that like, it's okay if you graduate, 50 percentile in your class. It's all right. If you're not going to specialize, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be a successful person. I just remember the only way that we really had to rank people as far as how successful we thought they'd be was how they graduated in your class. It's like, oh, they're top 5. We'll never have to worry about them again. They're probably going to be the most financially successful in the class. And that's not the way it turned out for us at all. Because a lot of times, if you think about it, if it comes easily to you, if you have a photographic memory, you're top of your class every semester in every kind of level that you are ever in, it's not like you develop like a ton of grit, right? You don't have that figure out ability gene that a lot of us average students have. It's like, oh, we have to look at things totally differently. It's like, what angle can I utilize in order to get ahead here? Because I don't have all the natural gifts in this very standardized academic environment. And just because I didn't get into ortho residency, I never wanted to, or endo or oral surgery, it's like, all right, here's what I have. I have my degree. It's the same degree that number 6 in the class got, because they didn't get into the residencies that they wanted to get into. But I had a different gear that a lot of people didn't have. I had this ability to kind of persist through failure and challenge that other people didn't have, because it was never an easy slog for me in anything, in business, leadership, in practice ownership, in academics, in athletics. Nothing was ever easy, but I had that kind of immigrant mentality. Like, I had all of these gifts. People worked really, really hard to get me here. They made sacrifices in order for my generation to thrive and to have the opportunity that we have here in the United States. And I didn't want to take those opportunities for granted. So I just did the best I could all the time.
Yeah.
No, let's go on. Okay. So let's go on to the next one. Okay. And this one maybe ties in a little bit. It's connect to create exponential growth. So this is how you have the power of being able to just connect people. If you like our podcast, check out Alex's newsletter, Just 2 Minutes. It's full of great advice, which makes sense considering it's her thoughts and not me sidetracking her every 2 seconds. You can subscribe at coupleofdentists.com. The link is in the show notes. Now, back to the pod.
Yeah, that's a great question too. I don't know how much of a Markism that is, but I do think that I'm a really, really good connector. So if you think about, we started the Dental Success Institute back in 2012, and now it's 2025, so 13 years ago. We started with our first summit. You guys went to a summit last year, but our first summit was 82 people, and there's probably 40 people in the room that weren't dental anything. They're like my real estate agent and the lady that cut my hair and some of our friends from town and like my mom and my aunt and my dad and his best friend. Like a bunch of people just came to stuff seats, and we were able to sell our first 11 masterminds, which is our private coaching group. So we started with 11 clients. And as the years went on, it was a slog, just trying to get people to live events was very difficult. And then the podcast hit in 2015, and that changed everything. Not only did we have a lot more attention and it was much easier to get people to live events and stuff, but the audience skewed much younger because the people that were listening to the podcast were younger. They were in dental school mostly, or young dentists, more technologically savvy. So my clientele went from near retirement age dentists, late stage dentists to young to mid-career dentists. And that changed everything. And that's when we had like the trajectory hockey stick moment in our company. And that is when we decided, like, oh my gosh, Mark can't do all the coaching calls anymore. Mark can't travel to all the dental practices anymore. We're going to need to figure out how we're going to get more coaches into the mastermind group. So I came up with this belt system. So now it's a white belt, blue belt, brown belt, or black belt. We categorize you based on systemization and leadership and culture and overhead. So if you hit a black belt level in all of our assessments, then you become a black belt, and you just kind of fall into whatever categorization you're currently in for all of those combined assessments. And we realized that, like, once you get to the black belt level, those people were qualified to coach other people to get to that level as well. So I was like, oh my gosh, it's self-selecting. These people are extremely smart, and the people that get to black belt level, because we have so many like very accurate assessments that we came up with over the years, holy cow, these people are the smartest people. Like, they are the tip of the spear as far as practice owners and leaders, and they're great with culture. They're good bosses. They just developed and evolved into these great people. And then, from that, I was able to be like, oh gosh, I need to send you out to my friend over here in the Northeast, because this guy is not a member of the mastermind, but you guys would just be great friends. I was completely thinking that I would just hook people up with these people that I knew that were smarter than me. So I had all these people from the podcast that were very, very smart, people outside of dentistry, people that were had really, really high business acumen, people that were the best of the best in the dental industry, and my black belt coaches now. And it became this thing where, like, people would come to me and I would see something in them that reminded me of somebody else. And then I would connect them, and those people would connect them. And it became this kind of web of awesomeness that kind of emanated from the dental success companies out to the rest of the world. And now you look up and you're like, holy cow, like, there's tens of thousands of people that listen to the podcast, which is crazy, but also a lot of people that I've like maybe even never met that met through the podcast. Or I know one person, and like 6 people removed, they met this other person because another person introduced them through the podcast or through, one of the dental success companies or one of the vendors that I work with. Or so I think it happened by accident, but now it's something that I'm very, very proud of, that I've been able to create best friends and business colleagues and partnerships. A lot of the times I have nothing to do with it other than just an introduction, or tangentially people kind of having in common that they listen to the podcast or have become, either a client or some sort of a vendor to the dental success universe.
Wow. I don't have that. I want that though.
Yeah. No, I mean, and you're right. Even with us just starting like this podcast journey a few months ago, like we'll randomly get like DMs from people who like I've never met them, I don't know who they are, and they'll post something like, hey, we really resonated with this, or like the fact that, you know, we're married and dentists, right? There's other people that are going through that same stuff, and it is really cool. It usually like kind of lights up your day when you get something like that and you feel like you can help someone. So it does, that is a really nice, I guess, perk of it. I like it.
Yeah, it's
all right.
I think it's one of the best perks, for sure. Yeah.
All right, so the next one is give, give, give. So it's generosity without expectation. That was the phrase that a few people used specifically for you, is that generosity without expectation.
Oh man, this is the next chapter of my life here is Smile Outreach International, and it was very, very touching because we just had our 3rd annual gala right after the summit, and our gala is. What we used to do after the summit is we'd have like a celebration party, and like it would be 2 hard days. It would be all day Friday, all day Saturday, formal content. And then we'd have some sort of a theme, like a white party or like a disco party or something. And everybody from the summit was invited, and we'd just have kind of a blowout party to celebrate the end of the summit. And, you know, we'd have between 300 and 400 people at these celebration parties, and they were super fun. And then I founded, you know, Smile Outreach International 3 years ago, which was the culmination of just like an inconceivable dream, probably over 20 years ago, when I was a young associate dentist. I started volunteering every Friday at the Cass Dental Clinic in downtown Phoenix. And that was a homeless dental clinic, and we would go down there, and every Friday I would just go and work on the homeless population down there. And that Cass Clinic turned into Brighter Way, and now it's just extremely well funded, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful facility now. And thousands of homeless people down in Central Phoenix are able to get dental work done for free down there. And Dr. Chris Volchek was one of my mentors and the founder of that clinic in the beginning. And we used to work like side by side in the single wide trailer. And it turned into this 12 operatory, gorgeous, state-of-the-art facility with every technology that you can possibly imagine now. So people come from all over the country now, and they volunteer there year-round. So they have no problem with volunteers, and they really do a great job of servicing this population that wouldn't have access to care any other way. So way back then, back in 2002, 2003, when I was working as a volunteer, I thought to myself, man, it would be so cool if I could have my own sort of foundation, but I would like to do it on an international basis. I would like to travel around and put clinics up. And so I started doing a bunch of mission clinics internationally. And what I noticed was I loved it. Every time I went, I was like, yeah, I'm going to find a way to carve out 3 to 5 days of every single year to go to a mission clinic. And I found lots of great ones. But what I found out was that like I would go out there and we would do great work. We would like sometimes be working on picnic tables, or sometimes be working in like underneath like ramadas or tents, but often there was no fresh water, and we were working with generators and rudimentary instrumentation and stuff. And we would do great stuff, and we'd see hundreds of patients. And and then people would ask like, this was amazing. Thank you so much. When are you coming back? And it was always like, you know, a shoulder shrug. Like, I don't know, like we may never come back. So it always left me feeling a little bad for the people that didn't make it, or they just couldn't make it for those 2 days, or maybe they had to travel a little bit too far, so they couldn't make it. So my vision was that I was going to create sustainable clinics all throughout the third world. And I wanted to create these clinics so that we could put local dentists in there that could do pre-op and post-op before the volunteers got there. And that's what we started doing. So Smile Outreach has been, in the last 3 years, we've been to Fiji, Tanzania, Dominican Republic, Honduras, to Mexico. We have plans to go to at least 4 or 5 more clinics, to create 4 or 5 more clinics this year. So that's what we've been able to do. And I remember the first time I brought one of my sons, and he was having a difficult time with school, and he was kind of struggling with some personal stuff, and he was 14 years old, and I brought him. And what I saw happen to him when I was on this mission trip with him, his eyes just lit up and it changed him. It changed our personal relationship because we were like in hard conditions, sleeping under mosquito nets with no electricity and like literally like trying to keep the mud from pooling on the tops of our shoes while we were doing dentistry. Those types of experiences with my kids changed their lives, but it changed my life too. So I've continued to do that. We've raised over $1 million for Smile Outreach in the last 3 years. We've done at least $5 million of free dentistry in the last 3 years, and we've seen thousands of dental patients completely for free. And what I realized was, when I was building up my quote unquote empire, that sounds so ridiculous to say it, but for lack of a better word, when I was building up my group of practices and businesses, I had 16 dental practices and I have at least a dozen businesses over the years. I was like, what are we doing? We're just like accumulating money for no good reason. And then we founded Smile Outreach and it gave me this purpose that I had never had before. It's like, oh, I'm working so hard on this side because I can funnel all of that to this legacy project and I can make sure that this thing kind of survives beyond my years. Like when I can no longer do dentistry anymore and my hands don't work anymore and my eyes don't work anymore and I've blown out my ears, this thing will survive past me. So I don't do dentistry for money anymore. I've retired from clinical dentistry. I go on at least 5 mission trips per year. We're still looking for new places to build these new locations. And I have this new purpose to my life. I've traveled over the last 12 months. I've traveled probably over 200,000 miles. Last year in 2024, I was in 90 different cities. And now I have just a whole different purpose. And that is exactly what you said. It's giving without expectation of anything in return. We get paid in hugs and tears of joy and happiness and avocados and tomatoes and sometimes live chickens and goats. But mostly hugs and gratitude. And that's all I'll ever need for the rest of my life. And that's my number one mantra in life now. It's totally my next chapter.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, because we do focus, and it probably, like you said, depends on like what phase you're at in your career, right? Mm-hmm. Like a lot of the younger dentists are probably starting their like accumulation phase, right? Where it's like I'm trying to build my practice, I'm trying to do all that, but it's nice to see that there's kind of stuff after that, because I do think we get stuck in this whole like, you said I'm going to start this other business or I'm going to start this other practice and do that, and you're just constantly in that grind of doing it, and then it's nice to see that when you kind of come out of that, there's something else that even has a greater purpose out of that people can do and that you're doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's awesome.
Well, thank you guys. Yeah. I mean, I tell the story all the time about, how the 4 futures developed: mind, meaning, muscle, and money. Those are the 4 futures we talk about in the Dental Success Institute all the time. I had my first 6 dental practices and I had this monetary goal since I was 15 years old. I didn't even know I was going to be a dentist yet, but I thought like the height of success was going to be if I can accumulate $1 million in cash. And if I was making $1 million per year. This is young, 15-year-old, naive, arbitrary goal I just put out there. And it's interesting how long that goal stuck with me. I gave myself 20 years to accomplish the goal. It actually took me 23 years to accomplish it. And at that point, I had been in dentistry for 7 years. And I looked up. I remember the day that I got the tax return and I realized, holy cow, I finally accomplished my goal. 3 years late, but I accomplished it. I made $1 million that year. I was looking at my tax return. I had $1 million in the bank. And I remember shutting the laptop going, oh my gosh, I've never been more unhappy in my life. Like that was the only gauge that I ever had to success was this $1 million goal. And so I sold 4 of my 6 dental practices at the time. And I went about trying to reestablish some sort of a foundation where I could feel more fulfilled. So I took the remaining 2 practices and I completely restructured the way that we did things. I put a nice set of systems in place. I delegated out. I hired a leadership team. And we started from scratch again. But also I created this matrix called the 4 futures. It's mind, meaning, muscle, and money. And the mindfulness quadrant was, how do you speak to yourself? What's your internal dialogue? what is your ability to handle stress? That was the mindfulness quadrant. The meaning quadrant was your legacy piece, just kind of like smile outreach, or your personal relationships. How strong are those? Just rate yourself. And then muscle is your personal kind of fitness, vibrancy, um, how the fuel that you put into your body, how much movement do you get, how tired do you feel at the end of the day, how well are you sleeping? That's the muscle quadrant. And then of course money. So if I was to assess myself back then, I would have gotten a 0 out of 10 in all the other quadrants, but a 10 out of 10 in the money quadrant. Mm-hmm. So clearly you can call me a successful person because I was failing in 3 of my 10 quadrants. So now that's kind of a way that an objective way that we use in order to help people figure out where they are, not just in the money quadrant, but in all of the quadrants of their life.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, I think that's where, for so long, we're all taught to focus there too, right? It's just money, right? And that's just where I don't know. I feel like that's where I always went to.
Yeah.
All right. So the next one, this is a good one too. So this one is character over cash. And so a few people had said that Mark is really good at choosing integrity over shortcuts.
We all know Eric wants more friends. If you're enjoying this episode, share the podcast and then tell them to DM Eric so he can hit his quota of 1 new friend per day. Now back to the episode.
Yeah, I'll tell you, like, you guys will find this out once once your numbers creep up there, and you can have a really strong, vibrant audience. You're going to get a lot of opportunities. The opportunities are just going to come dozens a day. And I've had a lot of people offer me a lot of money to be on the podcast for endorsements, to speak at their events. And a lot of times I'm not aligned with what they are delivering. I don't believe in their product or their service. And you have to decide early on in your quote unquote kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess
like your journey of where you want to go with
I guess for lack of a better word, your influencer journey, right? So you're going to have to decide early on, like, who am I going to get behind? What am I going to be all about? Like, do I believe that this thing is going to have legs for a long period of time, or am I just going to try to be a flash in the pan and make as much cash as I can in a short period of time? You have to decide that early on, because the opportunities will be there and the quick cash will be there. But if you trade that in, if you trade that quick cash in for, aligning yourself with people that are less than scrupulous when it comes to all things that lack integrity, or if you personally lack integrity, you're going to have a very, very short influencer career. One of the things I'm really, really proud about is that even over all the things that we've done and all the partnerships we've had and the different businesses that we've started, we still have a very good reputation. I think that I have a very good reputation in the industry still. And that's just because, like, I don't burn bridges, and I don't align myself with people who I don't agree with. That doesn't mean that I have to be disagreeable towards them and be mean. Like, there's a nice way to turn people down and say, hey, this just isn't the right time, or I don't think we're a great fit, but you can still be kind and still maintain that relationship. So those are some of the things that I learned early on. And the opportunities have been there to make a lot of cash, but I always tried to stay true to my beliefs and my integrity.
Yeah. I mean, and then for people listening too, that you've gone the route you did, which has made you happier, right? The path you took, right? I mean, I don't think it's one that I kind of equate it to, like, if there's like certain things in life that if you go the right path on it, you never regret it, right? Like, you ever meet anyone who gets in really good shape and they're pissed off they got in good shape, right? No. And I feel like it's the same way when you have that integrity too. I've never met someone that's gone down Mark's path. They end up all becoming successful because they're playing the long game, and they're always happy. And then you always hear it's the opposite side. The people that just do the quick, like you said, man, I need this money, or I'm just going to align this person. I'm not going to vet them at all. I'm just going to say, yeah, do it. That they burn out fast and they're never happy. So that is one thing that, if I could tell anyone, right, it's just do things the right way. And that is one of those things that if you just have integrity and you keep it, even when those other external forces tell you not to, it always ends up working better. I don't know. That's my thought on
I
it.
agree. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think having personal core values, just like company core values, is really important. If you stick to your core values and you use those as your guiding light, and keep them fluid, they will change as you change as a human. If you stick within and embody the core values that you create for yourself, your personal ethos, that's a great way to check yourself.
Yep.
All right. We got the last one.
Awesome.
You ready for it?
I'm ready.
All right. All right. It's the pie is big enough for everyone. So this goes back to having an abundance mindset and just helping others. Pretty much everyone I talked to had said, Mark has an abundance mindset, right? That was one of the things they all brought up.
Yeah. Well, that's, I'm so flattered by some of these things that people have said about me. First and foremost, all right, you might not know this, but there's 203,000 practicing dentists in the United States. 74% of those practicing dentists are practice owners, which is interesting because in contrast, there's over 1 million. There's 1.1 million practicing physicians, and 44% of them own their own dental practice. So there's about 440,000 practice owners that are physicians, and there's 170 something thousand. 170 something thousand dental practice owners. So I currently have 1,500 licensed dentists inside DSN, and we have 250 something private clients for DSI. That's out of 175,000 practicing dentists. So our total addressable market is 175. There are other consultants out there. There's lots of other podcasters out there. There are lots of people that copy me and to like a letter. Like we have 2,300 podcasts out there. So we've given our formula away thousands of times. And people take that to the letter, to the word, like literally. I was talking with Jay Conway. We have our own vocabulary. So we've probably created, I don't know, a dozen terms as far as how you analyze dental practices from a P&L standpoint. And we hear people use those all the time on their podcast or on their YouTube videos, and they never give us credit. They might not even know where it originates from.
Yeah.
But I find that more flattering than it doesn't make me upset, because there's so much work for everybody. Like if somebody is going to be underhanded and trying to steal something from me by saying that they're going to out deliver my deliverables, and they get a client over me, that's okay, man. I mean, we have more business than we could ever satisfy in my career. And that is if we double the size of our organization, which I think we could do, and we could have several years ago. But I interview people when they are interested in joining our group, and I turn more people away than we actually quote unquote accept. And if it was a money grab for me, we would just grow this thing as big and as fast as possible, but it would start to deteriorate the quality of the user experience. So I'm very, very careful about who I let into the group. I'm very intentional about that, but there's so much opportunity with 174,000 practice owners. We don't have to be underhanded or scarcity minded in order to get a full and bountiful business.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that is one thing that's been really nice, because I think a lot of dentists, when you go into that negative space and you're like, oh, I've been burned before. I'm sure you've had a lot of clients. I mean, we're good friends with some of the people in DSN and DSI, right? And a lot of us have become friends through past shared experiences that maybe weren't very positive. Mm-hmm. And the one commonality between those experiences has always tended to be the company or the group or the consultant, whatever it is, was so focused on growth that things just did start to deteriorate, and that level, either that level of, expertise you were hoping for or time commitment from that person or whatever it was, just started at a certain level and then it just kind of went away. And so I think that if I was to ever or Alex or whoever were like, we're going to start a group, I would do what you did, Mark, which is you need to grow it intentionally, and you always have to have the quality always has to be above everything else. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't, like you said, if it only grows to this amount, that's fine. As long as it keeps the same quality that I need and having those high standards. Because like you said, it is very easy, and I can see why a lot of people do it, to fall into that trap of like, oh man, like you said, I could just grow this double. Like, I have this much money, I can have double that, and like with like 5% more effort, that'd be sweet. But I think that's really nice that you are aware of that and then know how to almost like counteract it.
Well, thank you. And I think with every year that I'm in business, I realize more and more that I only want to do business with people that I enjoy being around. And it's just, you create a prison of your own making if you let people into your business that you have to work with on a daily basis, and you have to satisfy them, and you have to make sure that they're happy. And I see it as if I'm like kind of a shepherd of a herd. And it's like, if I am surrounding myself with people that I can't stand, that makes my life miserable. Why at this point of my life would I ever do that? The money is not worth it. It's like, if we don't see eye to eye, that's okay. There's lots of people that will take your money. Let's just agree to part ways now, and high five and a hug. And I'll even refer you to somebody, it's all good. It's all good. There's plenty of quality people that are, that are a good fit for you out there.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Well, Mark, I appreciate you letting us go through, do some of these.
Yeah, these Markisms.
This is a lot of fun. I mean, like I said, even though we've never worked directly with you on anything or been a part of DSN, like you said, your web that you've created has influenced us. So I think when you say, yeah, we've got, X amount of members in DSN and X amount in DSI, and that's such a small percentage of the total amount of dentists, I bet you if there was some way to run a metric on how many people you've influenced, it's got to be 10, 20 times that. So thank you for everything you've done for the dental community. And I think it's really cool what you're doing with all the, the international work and trying to make it bigger than yourself. So thanks so much.
Well, it was my honor, Eric and Alex, to be here. Thank you guys so much for being such great hosts. It was fun. Hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah, sounds good.